join us for another episode of Mancode, where real men have real conversations about leadership, relationship, morality, and dominion. Welcome to Mancode. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Mancode. As you can see, I'm Jonathan Russell. I have hair now. My skin looks, no, I'm just kidding. So we're changing the game up a little this week. The men have asked me to do some hosting this week, man. So I'm excited to have that perspective of the conversation. Tonight, we're gonna be talking about the transition from a boy to becoming a man, what that entails, all the things we learned growing up, and what we know now as we are older men and everything. So before we get started, I just want to encourage everyone to like, comment, subscribe, share, have these dialogues amongst each other, right? This dialogue is not just for us four or us five, but it's for everyone to have, right? And if you got anything you want us to expound on, hit us up, let us know, and we'll definitely have that conversation with you all. So before we get started, I just want to do a pulse check, man. Let's go around the mirror. How's everybody doing? We can start with Danielle. How you doing?
Doc, I'm doing great, man. Doing great. Ready for this conversation.
Yes, sir. Jonathan, what about you?
Oh, I'm tight, man. Ready to dive in. Ready to chop it up with my brother.
Cool. Pastor Malcolm?
What's up, Mancode Nation? Looking forward to it. I think this is going to be a good one. It's hot today. I think it's a nice one.
Yeah, for sure. No, I'm doing well, man. I'm excited about this topic like you all are. I'm looking forward to the wisdom that comes from you seasoned brothers. So first thing I want to do before we dive into our topics, when you think of, and I want you to remember this word for the end. So when you think of manhood, what's the first word that comes to your mind?
Responsibility.
Okay.
Strong leader.
A leader?
Yeah, I would just say strength.
Strength. Okay. I would say patience. I would use the word patience. So I want you to keep that word locked in your mind, because we're going to revisit it at the end of our discussion today. So again, we're talking about the ages and the stages of masculinity and looking at manhood through the ages. So when you hear the phrase boys to men, what does that mean to you?
Transition and maturity.
Can you expound on that a little bit?
When I think of a boy, naturally it's a child. He's immature. He's learning his way through. And so when you take that journey from a boy to a man, you've gone through some stages of learning. You bumped your head, you've had some L's, but you've come through to become what you were meant to be. And that is a leader, a developer, so everything.
Mm-hmm. So some key words you mentioned leader, developer, cultivator. Is that something that's innate, that as men we naturally have, or is that something that you have to constantly work on?
I think men naturally were built with that, but it has to be developed. It has to be brought out of us. And if something isn't developed, it's going to die out. You look at your muscles, for instance. If you don't work them, they shrivel, they kind of decrease. So I think it's the same with character issues, in terms of that.
Mm-hmm. That's great. What about you other gentlemen? Boys to men, what does that phrase mean to you?
I think Jonathan hit it pretty good, but I see it like you said, it's an evolution, it's a process. You start from the infancy stage, how you go from infancy to toddler and so forth. Those are the natural stages and so forth. As you go through those, you are developing certain parts of your anatomy, your physical body. Well, obviously you develop, if you're healthy and don't have any deformities, you have all your stuff with you. But as you develop, you learn to use them more. You get more precise with your fine motor skills and so forth, as well as your brain develops and so forth. And that's a part of the anatomy and the physiology and the mental capacity and so forth. But as you learn through life, through trials and error, you should, as you're being mentored, taught, and so forth, you should grow, because you're going to make certain mistakes. The key thing here is that it's unfortunate that some men They can be chronologically, let's say 55, 75, but they haven't really grown. They've just gone through the age, the stages as far as age-wise, but they haven't learned, as Brother Jonathan would say, they haven't been the character issues. They could be slacking in character development. They could be slacking in other areas because for whatever reason. I think these things really have to be nourished. They have to be cultivated, and they have to be taught. The Bible talks about training up people, because I think about when I was coming up. I mean, I had good role models in front of me and so forth. But if you're not taught and told certain things, it's easy to go astray. And so I think it's critical that you get people that are with you that can really show you the way, because it also talks about a child left to himself will bring his parents to shame. So you have to have somebody in your corner. You have to have that village, that family, and so forth. But long story short, it's a process. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's like anything. It's like fruit. The goal for fruit is to mature and become ripe. So as an individual, we want to become ripe. We want to become mature as we develop with age. And that just simply means being able to fulfill functions that we as men need to be able to do. And that's a whole gamut of things, which we'll get into later.
Yeah.
Malcolm out, drops mic.
Thank you, sir.
Go ahead, Danielle.
What I would just simply add is, as Pastor Michael alluded to a second ago, is that train up a child in the way they should go, that when they grow older, they won't depart from it. I think that, so when I listen to that and you talk about boys to men, there's some key factors that we should be looking at in that cultivation. Some tools that we definitely need to make sure that our young men have as they're maturing in age, so that when they get older and they step out into life and they start handling the weight of adulthood, they have the foundation and the tools necessary in order to manage it. The emotional side of it, the financial side of it, the relationship aspects of it, as far as, moving through relationships and marriage and things of that nature. I think because sometimes we feel like masculinity is something you get through osmosis, we don't really take real intentional care about how we are grooming the next generation of men to engage the world around us. And so when you say boys to men, those are the things I think about.
Yeah, and I agree with everything you all said. And I think a common theme amongst all three of what you said is it's starting as a child, right? Those are the foundational years where you see men, you interact with men as a young boy. So all right, going back to your child self, how would you say manhood was defined for you as a child? Or what did manhood mean to you as a child before you became a man?
Well, I think back when I was, unfortunately, I really didn't have a male figure in my life until I probably was around 9 or 10. I lost my dad at a young age. I was 3, but actually I never knew him. I can't recall any conversations with him. So I never had anybody to, be that role model for me. My uncle would come by every now and then, take me on a ride on his motorcycle, but that was about the extent of that. But then my mom got married in, 1966, a long time ago. And then my stepfather became that figure. And I think back, even 10 years down the road, he passed away, unfortunately. But he told me he is like, on his deathbed, pretty much. He said, hey, whatever you do in life, he said, be a man. Now, he didn't go into detail and explain that, but he said, be a man. But he modeled that and so forth. So I had a good picture of it. But as far as to be a man, to me, it was just, hey, take care of your business, be responsible, handle your affairs of a life. As he was a minister, by the way. So we believed, have integrity and, things of that sort. So yeah, so that was fortunate for me. But my early years, I didn't have that figure, so I had to learn a lot on my own. And so yeah, that's what kind of comes to my mind at this particular time.
So, well, before the next person goes, if I could build on what you were saying, Pastor Malcolm, you just said that you had to learn a lot on your own. What was that experience like? Just trying to figure it out on yourself without having that wisdom and guidance.
And that's an excellent question, because my mom, for example, you want to have the birds and bees talk with your kids and so forth. I didn't have that male figure. And my dad, my stepfather, he was good, but he didn't say a whole lot to me. But my talk from her was, hey, don't bring no babies home. You know what I'm saying? That was my birds and bees talk. So don't bring no babies here, things like that. So they weren't in-depth conversations. So I had to learn a lot of my own. And like I said, when I came up during the early 70s, before you were a twinkle in your mom and daddy eye, my role models, man, were like Superfly, Shaft. And I'm looking at that, man. I'm trying to get that money, trying to, have that big roll, that Cadillac with the grill in the front seat. So my pictures, and so I was kind of distorted, but I always wanted to be a professional athlete. So that kept me grounded. So I played sports, and that pretty much, if it hadn't been for that, no telling what I would have been. I could have been either road, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, so that for me, that's a great question. So I'm just glad that I was able to, with God's grace and people praying for me, kept me out of probably jail, prison, and maybe even death,
No, that's awesome. Appreciate you for your transparency and your sharing. What about you, gentlemen? Danielle and Jonathan?
I would have to say my father. I remember as a little kid, I used to try to dress like my dad, him going to work. So I would definitely say that kind of shaped my role of what a man is, seeing him be responsible, seeing him come home, seeing him take care of us, and seeing him sacrifice. And I had my grandfather around too. So you see that, and it definitely does mold you, because even though you may stray away from some of the teachings, the foundation that they built in you of hard work and respect, love for the family, those things stay, regardless of, if you get off course or not. So I would definitely say that was my first example of what a man is.
So I had a father in the home, and my dad was a skilled tradesman. And when I was little, I remember spending time with my father, him taking me to go to martial arts flicks and things like that. But when it comes to who told me about being a man, it was my mom's. Walking with my mom's, you never let a lady walk on the outside. You always have her walk on the inside. It was my mom's. You always open a door for a lady. It was my mom's. Any of the fundamentals of being chivalrous as a man, that information came from my mom's. Now I can't say that I didn't catch anything, mannerisms and ways, from my father, because he was in the home. But when I think about who reared me into what kind of man I should be, it was my mom's.
So with that, how did it shape your interaction with women as you got older? Like I know you said your mom taught you like how to be a gentleman, chivalry, and everything, but what did it do to shape how you view women as you got older, knowing that your mom taught you some of the basic principles of being a man?
So growing up in the 70s, man, there was this hard line respect for African American women. There wasn't none of the kind of mess that we got going on today. It wasn't calling nobody bees, and that's honorable to call somebody that, or any of the rest of that stuff. And so all I can say is that I think I went through the same thing as probably any other young man growing up in the city, because when you aren't necessarily raised by your father, and you're raised by the environment and the relationships that you have with other people. I've always had strong figures in my life. So we talked before about, the toxic masculinity in previous, seasons. Some of the men in my life basically exuded that. I grew up in the church. And so, most of the men in the church were either ushers or deacons, or they were the pastor. But most of them were ushers. If you know old school ushers, there were always these sizable men with white gloves and black suits.
Right.
And so
hands.
Yeah, big hands, like lead hands. So wearing gloves, white gloves. And so like I said, you glean from what you see around you, as far as, like, oh, that's how you do that, or that's how you do that. But to Pastor Malcolm's point, like I said, I'm a 70s baby, so I was still watching Black exploit films. I was watching the Mac and watching Shaft and, and watching Superfly and all the rest of those things. And so it really, you really were about trying to be a ladies' man, honestly. And so it was almost to the point where it was like whatever I was brave enough to attempt to try to do when it came to relationships, That's to the measure that I basically, tried to. I mean, I tried to, have multiple girlfriends, all of that stuff. It just didn't work for me. And that may be a good thing, but to go back around to your initial question, I don't think having my mother be that person, I think if anything, it just really just allowed me to have a greater sense of respect for females.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I would say what shaped my experience, much like Jonathan said, was my father. Just kind of watching him, how he was as a husband, how he was as a leader in the community, and really just how he was towards us, right? Like that affection, the affirmation, the validation, constantly involving us in his world, right? Whether it was, him having to go to the church to get some business done, or him having to go to a business meeting to get some business done. Like he always involved us in his world. So I got to see the different aspects of, his life as a man. And like Danielle said, like deacons in the church, man, like, so I have a deep love and appreciation for men's ministries, whatever church I go to. And, just watching men in leadership and ministry, watching men clean the church, drive the church van, carry chairs. Like I always feel like I think about myself as a kid, because it's like I can't wait till I'm older to, be that in ministry. Kind of a funny joke, but one thing I feel like a lot of guys miss out on my age is like the value in knowing how to drive a church van. That's like one of my jokes, but that was like one of the coming of age things was driving a church van, right? Once I did that for the first time, I was like, oh yeah, I'm a real man now. So we talked about boyhood, what a man was for us as kids, right? What about when you become teenagers? I think Pastor Malcolm alluded to this earlier. Puberty hits, your sexual interest changes a little bit. You start to notice things, voice changes. What was manhood for you when you kind of hit those like adolescence to early 20 years?
For us, the streets, horrible to say and shameful to say, but yeah, my mind went to the gutter. And that's no fault of my upbringing, because again, I had a solid foundation, but that was my choice. That was my choosing to disallow all that and chase women and chase negative things. So yeah.
So with chasing those negative things and women, can you think of like that moment that caused that shift for you, that caused you to kind of go down that route? Was it something that happened, something you were exposed to, or was it just natural?
Exposure. Because you see others around you doing things, obtaining things, and looking like on the outside that they're doing way better than you. And you're seeing your struggle, you're seeing your family struggle, so it's like, well, I like that too. That would be, nice too. So a lot of it is really just a lack of true focus, because you get your mind set on what another one has versus where you're going. And that always throws you off, leads you down a rabbit hole. So I would have to say that probably took effect in my head real tough, maybe about 15.
Yeah. That's good.
Can you just kind of say the question one more time, because so much is going through my mind right now when I think about this question. I want to make sure I really hone in on what you're asking me right now.
Got you. So we'll just go from Jonathan's age of 15 to late teens, 20s. What did manhood mean for you then? Because like I said, sexually you started to become more interested in women. You were exposed to a lot more things that you may have been sheltered from as a kid. And so looking back at that lens, like what was manhood for you, and what was that thing that kind of, I guess, shaped your different approach to life in that season?
Okay, I would just say if we use 15, I was just pretty much entering high school my sophomore year. But actually before that, puberty had kicked in. Kind of caught me off guard when you had that first what's called nocturnal emission. I'm saying, whoa, what's that? So that let me know that something was happening. But after that, because we were always interested in girls. We were kind of fast where I came up, man. We had people in our school, 12, 13, having babies, and so you had an idea what was going on. But as far as being puberty and responsible and so forth, it was my intention never to have. I know a lot of people that had babies, students that had children. Probably you guys did too, that had babies while they were in high school and so forth. But that was never my intention. But yeah, man, we were just kind of, honestly, like I say, we were just out there, trying to have fun, play sports, have fun. I wasn't focused on academics pretty much. My goal was to get to college and so forth, stay eligible so that I could play sports and then chase the girls. I was just a two-way street. I'm in church on Sunday looking at the clock so we can get out there, and you're in church with the wrong motives trying to do certain things, you know what I'm saying? So as far as puberty for me was it was it was a great time, just was without a lot of I would say a lot of good instruction, long story short, you know what I'm saying? But I had a great time. I was fortunate not to have any children prior to me getting out of high school and so forth. And yeah, parents were great. Can't blame them. They taught me, and they at least the best they could. And I knew the way. Now, as far as did I do everything the right way? Of course not. It's kind of wild now out there, trying to play house, trying to play doctor, and all that stuff. Yeah. So it was a great time for me, actually.
Yeah, and I'll just echo what Pastor Malcolm said. I mean, my generation actually ushered in teenage pregnancy, so we were kind of a over-sexualized generation of individuals. Like, I mean, honestly, I can't think of a time where chasing girls wasn't a thing. I mean, from from elementary all the way up to college, I don't know of a time where it wasn't. From writing notes and trying to see if, do you like me? Don't you like me? Check the box. You know what I'm saying? Trying to hook people up. Spin the bottle. Playing hide and go get it. I mean, you name it. Basically, these were the games that we were playing. You know what I'm saying? I'm just so. Even up through my teen years, even having, a couple of baby scares, if you would, going to the clinic and seeing if she was pregnant and having to reevaluate my life if she, it ended up being pregnant. But all the stuff being done up underneath my parents not even knowing. This is my life basically moving. And my mother and father don't know this stuff is happening. This is just, and I'm not sharing it either. I'm saying, once again, I told you, I grew up in the church. So this kind of behavior is not something that, you run to your parents and say, mama or dad, you know what I'm saying? So, you start cross-sharing this information and sharing it with those who are closest to you, your boys, either in school. I had 3 different types of friends. I had friends that I kicked it with at school. I had kids that I kicked it with at church, and then, I had my cousins, and my cousins were more grimier of all 3, because we would hang together as a family, and wherever we went, because church was an integral part of everything I did. That's just a reality of it. So, in the child, we would go for the summers and go to Christian camps, or we would go to Christian conventions. But even going to those places, my intentions wasn't, we wasn't going for church. It was just the girls were coming from all over the states or all over the country and coming to these particular things. So we going to see who we could, what numbers, it's all about getting numbers, And so I'm saying it all basically to say is that I don't know if there was ever a time that my intentions, you mentioned puberty. I can't say when I hit it. I could just honestly just tell you that we was always in it. So, it just that was the reality of my life. So
yeah.
If I could say something, Brother Austin, before you jump in, I'm just so glad when I was coming through, we didn't have social media. We didn't have none of that stuff. I tell you, because if they could have put on film some of the stuff I had, we did, man, we might be under the jail. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Thank God for that, man, because I tell you back then. Go ahead, bro.
They actually put the laws in my generation. They started, so, everybody knows that basically, growing up, there were a lot of indiscretions that men felt like they had the liberty to do to women without there being any kind of legal ramifications as a result of it. So, you know, growing up, you know, going around smooching girls on their behind or patting girls on their behind was a common thing. They may have like, oh, boy, quit or whatever, you know, you was like, oh, you know, you like it, all that kind of mess, you know. And then when I got to the 10th grade in high school, they passed a law that was like, no means no. That and it took a minute for us athletes to really drive that home, because it took a couple of times for people to actually get a couple of arrests and have an appear, you know, in front of a judge, you know, for this stuff, for it to really drive home. Like, they're not playing. No means no. You know, because no sometimes meant maybe in the minds of some athletes. So maybe in the minds of just men, period. I don't want to like pinhole just athletes. I think we just coming of age, I just think that there was just this whole reality of realizing that, okay, this adolescent stuff that we were doing before, and now we're being held accountable for it. It was an age of accountability that came in. So
yeah. And I feel like that's kind of a result of like a culture of entitlement, right? Like, you all talk about the blaxploitation films, even corporate America, right? Not just with white men, black men, whatever, right? That's that culture of entitlement that I feel like existed. And I feel like men felt as if we didn't and still don't have to be accountable to certain laws simply because we are men. And so going back to the question, so for me, it was kind of two worlds for me, right? Because I grew up in church, pastor's kid, you know, active in the church, played drums in the church. Everybody in the community knew who my parents were, knew who I was. And so it was just it was two worlds for me. So it was like the spiritual aspect, and also fighting what I see walking the hallways, right? In school, and not just women seeing, right? But like, you see drugs, you see fights, like people I went to high school with got murdered, got killed, right? And so it's just like, as a boy, I never imagined that like I would see these things. And I think that's when I became exposed to how diverse the world is. And initially it was a big shock for me, right? Because these things weren't talked about. They were hit on on a small level in like youth groups, going to these youth conferences, but actually seeing it, witnessing it, and you know, there was a lot of peer pressure involved in that as well. And like Jonathan said earlier, man, you kind of lived a wild lifestyle a little bit. You know, I mean, I wasn't using drugs or anything like that, but just as far as like my interactions with women, sometimes the things that I would get myself into, right? But I'm always thankful that I had the wherewithal and the friends to hold me accountable, to say like, bro, that's not you. Like, you know, that's not what you want. And so definitely thankful for that.